consider this talk a little curation of interesting things. What's to come is the opinion pieces, the data-driven stories, etc. I'm just going to round up a couple of interesting things I've seen recently. So I'll talk about three things: experiments, habit design, and unbundling. And each bit's going to start with a little bit of stuff from the tech world, and then a little bit of stuff from media. So firstly, experimentation, and this slide background doesn't really mean anything, they're just quite nice. But experimentation isn't anything, there's nothing new here, but I've just noticed a few things recently which are very interesting, and so I just wanted to share a couple of those. Before I do, I really love this quote. It's the CTO of Huffington Post. He's now left and gone on to something different, but I think when talking about experimentation, it's really important to have a particular culture and mindset in an organisation. I think this sums it up brilliantly. So, did anyone read Jeff Bezos' recent shareholder letter? It came out about 2 weeks ago and it's absolutely fascinating. And one bit in particular really grabbed me, and that was this. And so, it's a bunch of numbers. What this is about is the number of experiments that their team, Web Labs, did over the course of the last few years. So Web Labs is a division, a program that explore different things within the organisation, like tweaks to the homepage, the launches of new services, etc. And so this is the number of experiments they did in just 1 year. Quite a phenomenal number. But if you've seen the Facebook film, I think there's that really lovely quote, bit by Sean Parker, played by Justin Timberlake, where he says, if you think a million's exciting, forget that, it's all about a billion. So if you think 1,000 a year is good, or 2,000 is good, you should listen to what Facebook do. So I was reading this blog post of the day by a guy at Facebook, this chap here. His job title is empiricist / data scientist. And he was describing how they run over 1,000 experiments every single day, which is quite phenomenal. And so the post was accompanying the open sourcing of a platform which I completely had a blank of, but at the same time they've written a paper about it, and it's an open source A/B testing platform. And I think that's why these guys are growing quite phenomenally quickly at the moment. And where's this interesting stuff happening in media? So has anyone seen these? This is Buzzfeed's new lists. So they're doing quizzes now. And I think where this originated from is they did a quiz at some point last year. And later on in the year, they were kind of analysing the performance of a variety of pieces of content on the site, and noticed that this is by far and away received the most attention. So they started to try another one. And so they wrote something about what city would you live in. Before long, it had amassed 20 million views. And said, OK, let's think about integrating some functionality into the CMS, which will allow us to create and post these formats more frequently. And now they're doing this on and on and on. So it's very impressive. So as I was reading around, there was lots of little tips in these different articles I was reading. So I grabbed a couple of them here with a kind of a where to start type thing. So I think the first thing that's really interesting is staffing up. I don't think experiments is something that can happen as a standalone in a product team. I think it's the interesting thing about Facebook, I think Guardian might have a team that are an experiments team, is that they have separate groups of people who are purely focused on this. So they are scientists, they're creatives, they're engineers, but their sole focus is in the process of creating and running experiments. So I think having the right team and importantly creating a space for them, freedom to be able to do this is really important. Second bit is about establishing product value. So there's a lot of hype at the moment about the term growth hacking, and one of the most interesting posts on it is by a guy called Chamath, who ran the growth team at Facebook back in the day. And on Quora, there's a brilliant post which talks about their tactics. And one of the things he said is it's really important to establish product value. Why are people coming to you? And very early on, they realised that churn on Facebook was directly linked to the number of friends you'd connected with. And as soon as you got to 4, you stayed. And so they'd worked out that connection and built around that. They also had a very simple metrics framework. So Tom, you and I were talking about a while back about data coming out of people's ears. What the hell do you do with it? I don't think you need many data points, but it's important to align them to the right point in the journey. So they, at Facebook, just have a simple funnel that they were using. Dave McClure has something called the startup metrics or the pirate metrics, which are quite a simple way of getting going. And then tooling up. So Facebook built their own multivariate testing platform and released it. There's others, Google Experiments is very easy to get going with. But I think having the tools and importantly the ability to deploy quickly to try out new experiments is really important. So that's experiments, and I'm going to finish with the question of what's your next experiment going to be? And then I'm going to go and talk about habit design. And we've at Adaptive been really interested in behaviour design, behavioural science, behavioural economics, in some projects we've been doing recently. But Marissa Mayer, when she joined Yahoo, one of the first sort of shareholder calls she did, earnings calls, in January 2013, she said, our strategy is going to be about products to do with digital habits. We're going to build products around existing digital habits. And that was really interesting. So they identified them and then have focused on products related to it. This chap, rather friendly looking guy, is BJ Fogg. BJ Fogg runs the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford. And I saw him talking at South by Southwest last year and was hooked. This guy's amazing. And if you look through the years of his alumni at Stanford, it's the people from Instagram, it's the people from Pinterest, it's the people from whatever the new thing is. They've all been there and kind of learned his interesting and simple models. This is what he talks about when he talks about creating behaviours. So this is behaviour model. So behaviour equals motivation plus ability plus trigger. And so motivation to do something, the ability to be able to do it, and then what triggers it. He says there's, and I can send a link around to whoever's interested to his site and related papers. He says there's 6 factors which impact motivation. There's 6 things which motivate ability. But he says that it's ability that's the most important thing to play around with because motivation is quite a hard thing to change. And he's got this lovely chart here where he talks about be able to move people over this action line. So I don't really need to explain it, but motivation here, ability. And so he's brilliant. He's worth checking out. Now the level up from BJ Fogg is Nir Eyal. Has anyone heard of him? He's got this fantastic book called Hooked. And Kat, who's at the back, one of our product managers, and I went to a workshop that he did on Monday at Ogilvy in Canary Wharf. And it was really interesting. And so he's got something called the hook model, which is building on top of BJ Fogg's model, really. And he talks about the importance of these 4 steps, the trigger, the action, the reward, and the investment, and about designing experiences related to this. So understanding what the internal and external triggers are, what the action might be in returns. It could be clicking on an email, scrolling a page, etc. What happens when you do that? So with Pinterest, he talks about the uncertainty of what's going to appear below the fold. And then the investments. The investment he refers to as priming pulling the trigger for the next hook. This is an interesting little pattern in a Twitter app that I use. I've kind of got quite hooked to just pulling down and letting go and just seeing what's going to happen when I do and seeing the interesting tweet that might come in. And I was looking around for other little patterns like that and discovered this on Forbes.com. I don't know how long it's been there. This little next post article. I'm not sure about the rest of the page, but I think this thing here is quite interesting. And you can just flick quickly through, and it became quite addictive and repetitive and kind of drew you through. So this section I'm going to finish with the question of which habit would you like to create? And as I said, I can do a couple of links to Nir Eyal or BJ Fogg, where you can go and do some more reading. And the final one is unbundling. And I'm going to start with a couple of great pictures. So Reid Hoffman and Mark Zuckerberg, who are both looking at things up here somewhere. But unbundling, people have started taking their services to pieces. So papers used to bundle lots of things together, so classifieds, listings, all different types of things, and put them together. LinkedIn.com does lots of stuff, but when it comes to mobile, I think they've got 5 or 6 different products. They've got a specialist messages one, they've got a recruiter one, they've got Pulse, which is like an RSS reader, and they've got the main one as well. Facebook's got, I think, 4 or 5 now. So Camera, Poke, Facebook.com, Messages, and then the things they've been acquiring. And Zuckerberg, I think, talks about unbundling in a really interesting way. I think the driver for it really is about the fact that people are using a different type of device where there's different sort of usage habits. But he talks about the challenge in attracting people when there's so much competition, sustaining the attention, and this article that I was reading, this is on quartz.com, was talking about how the likes of Facebook and LinkedIn, etc., are the ones that are very quickly unbundling themselves. And this is the reason why. And so I think if you read some of the stuff by Zuckerberg, he was saying you had to get to messages in the Facebook app, you had to do a couple of clicks to get there. He said, well, that's too many, so just completely strip it out and put it in a separate app where you can focus on that experience. The New York Times seem to be doing something similar themselves, and so they announced last year they were going to spin out several verticals. So food and dining is going to become a separate thing, travel, something called Need to Know, and opinion as well. Boston Globe are also doing it, and so Boston Globe used to comprise Boston.com and Boston Globe. They've now split. There's also going to be the arrival of 3 new sites. So Beta Boston, which is going to be about tech and biotech, BDC Wire, which is about arts and entertainment, and also a Catholicism site is going to be arriving at some point. But I think it's quite interesting how they're kind of breaking down a package of goods to offer a special experience. And so the question here is, if Zuckerberg's talking about single purpose experiences, what are your single purpose first class experiences? And that's me.